Chapter 38 of Nicholas Nickleby by Charles Dickens. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Simon Evers. Nicholas Nickleby by Charles Dickens. Chapter 38 comprises certain particulars arising out of a visit of condolence, which may prove important hereafter. Smike unexpectedly encounters a very old friend, who invites him to his house and will take no denial. Quite unconscious of the demonstrations of their amorous neighbour, or their effects upon the susceptible bosom of her mamma, Kate Nickleby had, by this time, begun to enjoy a settled feeling of tranquillity and happiness, to which, even in occasional and transitory glimpses, she had long been a stranger. Living under the same roof with the beloved brother from whom she had been so suddenly and hardly separated, with a mind at ease, and free from any persecutions which could call a blush into her cheek or a pang into her heart, she seemed to have passed into a new state of being. Her former cheerfulness was restored, her step regained its elasticity and lightness, the colour which had forsaken her cheek visited it once again, and Kate Nickleby looked more beautiful than ever. Such was the result to which Miss Nickleby's ruminations and observations led her, when the cottage had been, as she emphatically said, thoroughly got to rights, from the chimney-pots to the street door-scraper, and the busy little woman had at length a moment's time to think about its inmates. "Which I declare I haven't had since I first came down here," said Miss Nickleby, "for I had thought of nothing but hammers, nails, screwdrivers, and gimlets, morning, noon, and night." "You never bestow one thought upon yourself, I believe," returned Kate, smiling. "Upon my word, my dear, when there are so many pleasanter things to think of, I should be a goose if I did," said Miss Nickleby. "By the by, I have thought of somebody too. Do you know that I observe a great change in one of this family, a very extraordinary change?" "In whom?" asked Kate anxiously. Not in your brother, my dear," returned Miss Nickleby, anticipating the close of the sentence, "for he is always the same affectionate, good-natured, clever creature, with the spice of the I won't say who in him when there's any occasion, that he was when I first knew you. No, Smike, as he will be called, poor fellow, for he won't hear of an Mr. before his name, is greatly altered even in this short time." "How?" asked Kate. "Not in health?" "No, perhaps not in health exactly," said Miss Nickleby, pausing to consider, "though he is a worn and feeble creature, and has that in his face which it would wring my heart to see in yours. No, not in health." "How then?" "I scarcely know," said the miniature painter, "but I have watched him, and he has brought the tears into my eyes many times. It is not a very difficult matter to do that, certainly, for I am easily melted. Still, I think these came with good cause and reason. I am sure that since he has been here he has grown, from some strong cause, more conscious of his weak intellect. He feels it more. It gives him greater pain to know that he wanders sometimes and cannot understand very simple things. I have watched him, when you have not been by, my dear, sit brooding by himself, with such a look of pain as I could scarcely bear to see, and then get up and leave the room so sorrowfully and in such dejection that I cannot tell you how it has hurt me. Not 3 weeks ago he was a light-hearted, busy creature, overjoyed to be in a bustle, and as happy as the day was long. Now he is another being, the same willing, harmless, faithful, loving creature, but the same in nothing else." "Surely this will all pass off," said Kate. "Poor fellow!" "I hope," returned her little friend, with a gravity very unusual in her, "it may. I hope, for the sake of that poor lad, it may. However," said Miss Nickleby, relapsing into the cheerful, chattering tone which was habitual to her, "I have said my say, and a very long say it is, and a very wrong say too. I shouldn't wonder at all. I shall cheer him up to-night, at all events, for he is to be my squire all the way to the Strand. I shall talk on and on and on, and never leave off till I have roused him into a laugh at something. So the sooner he goes, the better for him, and the sooner I go, the better for me, I am sure, or else I shall have my maid gallivanting with somebody who may rob the house, though what there is to take away besides tables and chairs I don't know, except the miniatures, and he is a clever thief who can dispose of them to any great advantage, for I can't, I know, and that's the honest truth." So saying, little Miss La Creevy hid her face in a little flat bonnet, and herself in a very big shawl, and fixing herself tightly into the latter by means of a large pin, declared that the omnibus might come as soon as it pleased, for she was quite ready. But there was still Mrs. Nickleby to take leave of, and long before that good lady had concluded some reminiscences bearing upon and appropriate to the occasion, the omnibus arrived. This put Miss La Creevy in a great bustle, in consequence whereof, as she secretly rewarded the servant girl with 18 pence behind the street door, she pulled out of her reticule 10 pennyworth of halfpence, which rolled into all possible corners of the passage, and occupied some considerable time in the picking up. This ceremony had, of course, to be succeeded by a second kissing of Kate and Mrs. Nickleby, and a gathering together of the little basket and the brown paper parcel, during which proceedings the omnibus, as Miss La Creevy protested, swore so dreadfully that it was quite awful to hear it. At length, and at last, it made a feint of going away, and then Miss La Creevy darted out and darted in, apologising with great volubility to all the passengers, and declaring that she wouldn't purposely have kept them waiting on any account whatever. While she was looking about for a convenient seat, the conductor pushed Smike in, and cried that it was all right, though it wasn't, and away went the huge vehicle, with the noise of 6 brewers' drays at least. Leaving it to pursue its journey at the pleasure of the conductor aforementioned, who lounged gracefully on his little shelf behind, smoking an odoriferous cigar, and leaving it to stop, or go on, or gallop, or crawl, as that gentleman deemed expedient and advisable, this narrative may embrace the opportunity of ascertaining the condition of Sir Mulberry Hawk, and to what extent he had by this time recovered from the injuries consequent on being flung violently from his cabriolet, under the circumstances already detailed. With a shattered limb, a body severely bruised, a face disfigured by half-healed scars, and pallid from the exhaustion of recent pain and fever, Sir Mulberry Hawk lay stretched upon his back, on the couch to which he was doomed to be a prisoner for some weeks yet to come. Mr. Pike and Mr. Pluck sat drinking hard in the next room, now and then varying the monotonous murmurs of their conversation with a half-smothered laugh, while the young lord, the only member of the party who was not thoroughly irredeemable and who really had a kind heart, sat beside his mentor, with a cigar in his mouth, and read to him, by the light of a lamp, such scraps of intelligence from a paper of the day as were most likely to yield him interest or amusement. "Curse those hounds!" said the invalid, turning his head impatiently towards the adjoining room. "Will nothing stop their infernal throats?" Messrs. Pike and Pluck heard the exclamation and stopped immediately, winking to each other as they did so, and filling their glasses to the brim as some recompense for the deprivation of speech. "Damn!" muttered the sick man between his teeth, and writhing impatiently in his bed. "Isn't this mattress hard enough, and the room dull enough, and pain bad enough, but they must torture me? What's the time?"
8:30,
replied his friend. "Here, draw the table nearer, and let us have the cards again," said Sir Mulberry. "More piquet. Come." It was curious to see how eagerly the sick man, debarred from any change of position save the mere turning of his head from side to side, watched every motion of his friend in the progress of the game, and with what eagerness and interest he played, and yet how warily and coolly. His address and skill were more than 20 times a match for his adversary, who could make little head against them, even when fortune favoured him with good cards, which was not often the case. Sir Mulberry won every game, and when his companion threw down the cards and refused to play any longer, thrust forth his wasted arm and caught up the stakes with a boastful oath and the same hoarse laugh, though considerably lower in tone, that had resounded in Ralph Nickleby's dining-room months before. While he was thus occupied, his man appeared to announce that Mr. Ralph Nickleby was below, and wished to know how he was to-night. "Better," said Sir Mulberry impatiently.
Mr. Nickleby wishes to know, sir."
"I tell you better," replied Sir Mulberry, striking his hand upon the table. The man hesitated for a moment or two, and then said that Mr. Nickleby had requested permission to see Sir Mulberry Hawk, if it was not inconvenient. "It is inconvenient. I can't see him. I can't see anybody," said his master, more violently than before. "You know that, you blockhead!"